Locked in a room the size of a coffin, Lila Hart had one night to escape or be sold to a stranger. What she does next will leave you stunned. The room was so small it felt like it was squeezing the life out of her. Just a narrow cot with a lumpy mattress, a chipped chamber pot in the corner, and a cracked wooden stool that wobbled if you sat on it. To Lila Hart, it wasn't just a room, it was a grave swallowing her slow. Pale morning light trickled through the slatted window, weak like tea left out too long, and dust floated in the beams, swirling like ghosts that couldn't rest. The wallpaper peeled off in long, curling strips, yellowed and damp, and the cold stone floor bit in her bare feet like tiny teeth. She'd once counted every board in the ceiling, 43 of them, all bent and swollen with moisture, just to keep her mind from breaking. Those boards stared down at her, silent, watching her unravel day by day. Somewhere downstairs, a door slammed hard enough to shake the walls. Then came the boots, heavy, stomping, angry. Lila didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago that showing fear only made it worse. Instead, she locked her eyes on a dark knot in the wooden wall and breathed through her nose, slow and even. Her heart thumped loud, though, a traitor she couldn't quiet. She hated that her body still gave her away. The lock rattled, metal grinding against metal. Keys jangled like a warning. Lila stood up, her thin cotton dress hanging off her like a shroud on a scarecrow, loose and faded. The door creaked open, slow and heavy, and there stood Rafe Cutler. He was chewing something brown and sour, the smell hitting her like a punch. His boots were caked with barn mud, tracking it onto the stone, and his eyes raked over her, cold, hard, like she was something he owned and despised. "You eat yet?" He growled, voice rough as gravel. She didn't answer, just held his stare. He stepped inside, boots thudding, and slapped her across the face, quick, careless, like swatting a bug. Her cheek stung sharp, but she didn't cry. She hadn't cried in weeks, maybe months. "I asked you a question, girl," he snapped. "No," she said, keeping her voice flat, steady. He grunted, annoyed, and tossed a tin plate onto the floor. It clattered loud, a slab of dry beef and half a stale biscuit rolling off into the dust. She didn't move to pick it up. Rafe stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, the stink of tobacco and sweat curling into her nose. "Ungrateful, ain't you? My brother was too soft. Let you read those damn books, let you talk back. Now you think you're above us." Lila didn't blink. "It was too good for you," she thought, and said it with her eyes. That earned her another slap, harder this time, the sound echoing in her ears like a tolling bell. Rafe sneered, showing yellow teeth, then turned to leave. "Eat that or starve. We got business tonight. Man's coming through, looking to buy." Lila froze, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "Buy? Buy what? Me?" Rafe chuckled, low and mean, as he walked out. "Ain't nobody gonna keep feeding a useless widow forever, girl. Better start thinking how to be useful." The door slammed shut. The lock clicked tight. She was alone again, but the word "by" echoed in her skull like a drum. She sank onto the cot's edge, fingers trembling though her face stayed still. Years back, she might have sobbed, but not now. She touched the fresh bruise blooming on her cheek and let her mind drift. Not to run away, but to remember who she'd been. Before this cage, she was Lila Hart, daughter of a preacher with kind eyes, a girl who loved books and ran barefoot through creek beds, chasing the wind. She'd sing hymns to the open sky, her voice carrying over the hills. At 20, she met Eli Tanner, awkward, gentle, nothing like the rough, cruel men in his family. He'd read her poetry by the crackling firelight, his voice soft and shy, brought her wildflowers tied with string, built her a swing on their tiny patch of land that creaked when she sat on it. 3 years later, he was gone, crushed under a spooked horse during a cattle drive, his body dragged back with blood staining his boots. They didn't let her say goodbye. They buried him under a crooked oak behind the barn, the wind whispering through its branches. After that, everything she'd known shattered. Rafe and his brothers took the land, nailed boards over the little library Eli had made for her, and locked her in this room. At first, she'd fought, screamed till her throat bled, clawed at the door, smashed plates against the walls, but no one came. The town believed she'd moved east to live with kin. Her letters to her father, scribbled in secret, never made it past the porch steps. The silence had grown thick over time, wrapping around her like a second skin, but her mind stayed free. Under a loose floorboard, she kept a diary, pages stuffed with hidden thoughts, scratched out with charcoal she'd stolen from the fireplace downstairs. The words danced between despair and hope, a map of her survival. At night, she'd hum old church songs under her breath and trace escape routes in her head. Through the window, past the barn, down to the creek that snaked toward town. She wouldn't die here, she swore it. The wind howled outside as the day stretched on, rattling the loose window pane like it was trying to break free too. Rafe's words gnawed at her. Someone's coming tonight, looking to buy. Her time was running out. She knelt by the fireplace, fingers digging between the stones. A month ago, she found a rusted nail sticking out of a loose brick. She tugged at it now, holding her breath, until the stone shifted with a scrape. Behind it, tucked away like a secret gift, was a stub of iron, a broken hinge, maybe jagged on one end, heavy in her hand. She gripped it tight, heart slamming against her ribs. It wasn't much, but it might just be enough to change everything. The sun dipped low, painting the room in long, creeping shadows. Lila slid the iron piece in her dress pocket and waited, ears straining. Laughter drifted up from the kitchen, deep, sloppy, drunk. A dog barked outside, sharp and restless. A door creaked open, then banged shut. Rafe and the others were drinking, like they always did before company came. The hour dragged, slow as mud, then went quiet, too quiet. She pulled the tool from her pocket and crept to the window. For days, she'd been prying at the wooden slats with stolen hairpins and her broken fingernails, loosening them bit by bit. Tonight, she had something stronger. She wedged the iron into a split in the frame and twisted hard. The wood groaned, splintered loud enough to make her wince. One slat popped free, then another. She pressed her face to the gap. Cold air kissed her skin, moonlight spilled in, and the smell of wet grass hit her like a promise. Freedom was out there, so close she could taste it. She squeezed one hand through the hole, then her shoulders, the rough edges scraping her arms bloody. It was tight, bruising, but she shoved harder. Her feet scraped the sill, and then she was falling softly into a patch of tall weeds below. Her breath hitched in her chest. She was outside. The night wrapped around her like a cloak, thick and dark. Crickets sang a wild chorus. The barn loomed nearby, a black shape against the sky. She crouched low and crept through the shadows, heart hammering so loud she thought they'd hear it. If I can just make it to the creek, follow it to town. Lila, Rafe's voice sliced through the stillness like a whip. She spun around, stomach dropping. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the flickering lantern behind him, a shotgun resting easy in his hands. "You stupid little," he spat, venom dripping from every word. She ran. Footsteps thundered after her, heavy and fast. The field stretched out uneven, rocks biting in her bare feet, but she didn't stop. Her lungs burned like fire. Branches slashed at her face, drawing thin lines of blood. Then a sharp pain exploded in her scalp. A hand grabbed her hair and yanked hard. She crashed down into the dirt. The wind knocked clean out of her. Rafe towered above, panting, his face red with rage. He hit her once, twice, his fist crashing into her jaw until the night blurred into a haze. When she came to, she was back in the room. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked, loud and final. Silence swallowed her again. Her lip bled, warm and sticky, one eye swelling shut, but her spirit still flickered, refusing to die. She crawled to the corner, wincing, and pried up a loose floorboard with shaking hands. Her diary lay there, waiting. She opened it, her bloody fingers smearing the pages as she wrote. "Tonight, I saw the stars again. I felt the wind on my face. I'm not broken, not yet." She didn't sleep. Dawn crept in, gray and heavy, casting a dull light over the room. Footsteps stomped closer, deliberate now. Lila sat up, back straight, hair wild and tangled. a dark bruise spreading across her cheekbone like a storm cloud. Rafe stepped in, his eyes bloodshot, his mouth a tight line. "You're lucky he still wants to meet you," he grumbled, voice low and sour. "Wash your damn face. Be ready." She said nothing, just stared through him. He turned and left, boots echoing down the hall. She waited, breath slow, her fingers curling around the broken hinge, still hidden in her pocket. If tonight's the night, they sell me like some animal. Someone's going to bleed before it happens. Far off, beyond the hills she couldn't see, a stranger was riding closer. Dust on his coat, guns at his hips, a man carrying his own shadows and a flicker of mercy. But for now, Lila was alone but not beaten. Dust shimmered in the late afternoon air, glowing gold and red like fireflies caught in a jar. The outlaw rode slow, slouched in his saddle, the brim of his hat pulled low to shield his face from the sinking sun. His horse, a grizzled mare with a limp in her left leg, plodded along the cracked, dry trail leading into Dustwater Creek, her hooves kicking up little puffs of dirt. Cade Morrow, known in some places as Mercy, wasn't a man who smiled easy or spoke much. His revolver had done most of his talking over the years, its weight a constant at his side. But he carried himself with a quiet heaviness, like someone who'd seen the ugliest parts of people and still, somehow, looked for something worth saving. A scar curved along his jaw, half hidden by a patchy beard, and his eyes were pale gray, cold as ash after a fire's gone out. As he rode into town, the few folks on the street glanced his way, then quickly turned their heads. Not because he was feared, not anymore, not really, but because his name still carried stories, some true, some twisted, and none easy to forget. He didn't blame them. He wouldn't trust a man who looked like him either. He tied his horse to a post outside the saloon and stepped inside, boots thudding on the worn wooden floor. The place smelled of stale beer and old tobacco, thick enough to cling to your skin. A piano sat untouched in the corner, its keys yellowed and silent. The bartender, a round man with a twitchy eye and a rag slung over his shoulder, squinted at Cade as he approached the counter. "Don't want no trouble," the man said, almost like a reflex. "Won't give you any," Cade replied, his voice dry as the dirt outside. The bartender poured whiskey into a scratched glass, amber liquid sloshing a little. Cade took it without a word and turned to scan the room. A group of ranch hands played cards in the corner, their laughter rough and low. An old man snored into his hat, slumped over a table. Nothing worth noting, until a tall man in a preacher's black coat stepped in from a back room and froze when he saw Cade. Their eyes met across the dim space. The preacher looked startled for a moment, then curious, like he'd just found something he'd been searching for. Cade sipped his drink, the burn steadying him. "You look like you got something on your chest," he said, voice low. The man stepped closer, his face half-shadowed under the wide brim of his hat. "Name's Jonah Reed. I know who you are. Rode with Danvers' gang once, didn't you?" "Years back," Cade said, not offering more. Jonah pressed on, undeterred. "They say you killed a marshal in his own house." Cade's jaw tightened. "I didn't, but I was there when it happened. Ain't proud of that." The preacher nodded slow, like he was weighing the words. "Then maybe the Lord left some mercy in you after all." Cade raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "You don't strike me as the type to hunt help in a saloon." "I don't, usually," Jonas said, his voice dropping softer, urgent. "But I don't know where else to turn. My daughter, Lila, she's missing. Been months now. Word was she moved out east, but I ain't got a single letter. That girl wrote me every week since she could hold a pen." Cade frowned, leaning back against the counter. "What's this got to do with me?" Jonah's voice thickened, like he was choking on it. "I think she's still here, stuck on that damn Cutler property." Cade's eyes narrowed. "Cutler? Eli's widow?" Jonah nodded, his hands clenching at his sides. "He died 2 winters ago, trampled in a cattle stampede. Left her alone with that family." Cade's mind flickered back. He remembered Eli. Quiet fella, boots always clean, never one to pick a fight. Married that sweet preacher's daughter with the dark hair and bright laugh. Cade had met them once, years ago, delivering supplies. Eli had offered him coffee and a kind word, no judgment in his eyes. Lila had smiled at something her husband said, soft and real. He hadn't forgotten that. "You saying they're holding her?" he asked. Jonah lowered his voice to a whisper. "I believe it. Sheriff's in their pocket. Says she left on her own." "I've not called out," begged. No answer. "They keep that house locked up tight as a vault." "I know she's in there, Cade." Cade set his glass down, the whiskey barely touched, a slow twist starting in his gut. He pulled his hat lower, thinking he had no real reason to get tangled in this. Not his fight, not his blood, but that memory of Lila's laugh stuck like a splinter. "Where's the property?" he asked, voice flat. Jonah gave directions, every turn, every landmark, spilling out fast like he'd memorized it from pacing the route in his mind. Cade listened, locking it all in. When the preacher finished, Cade nodded once, tight and grim. "I'll go look," he said, and that was that. The Cutler place sat on a hill east of town, half-eaten by weeds and thorns, surrounded by sagging fences that leaned like they'd given up. Cade rode in just after dusk, keeping his mare downwind and tying her to a low branch in the tree line. He crouched in the brush, watching the house for a long time. A lantern glowed behind a curtained window, casting a dull yellow light. Shadows moved inside, broad figures, slow and heavy, passing back and forth. No sign of Lila yet, but the air felt wrong, thick with something he couldn't name. He waited, patient as stone. An hour crawled by, then two. Finally, the front door swung open. A big man, slouched and carrying a jug, stepped onto the porch. He laughed loud, spat into the dirt, then stumbled toward the barn, swaying like he'd already had too much. Cade took his chance. He slipped around to the back of the house, silent as a ghost, and found a low window, slatted with wood, but one slat hung loose, a crack just wide enough to peek through. Inside, a woman sat on a cot, shoulders straight, hair messy and dark. A bruise painted her cheek, ugly and fresh. Her hands moved over a page in her lap, writing with what looked like a blackened stick, her lips whispering as she worked. Cade's breath caught. She was thinner, paler, but it was her, Lila, and she was a prisoner. He crept back to the trees, heart steady but mind racing. He waited until the house went still, the lantern dimming, the laughter fading to snores. Then he moved to the side door, old, bolted but weak. His knife slid into the lock, twisting until it groaned and gave way. Inside, the air stank of rot and sour meat, heavy enough to choke on. He stepped careful, room by room, avoiding the creaky boards, ears sharp for any sound, boots, voices, anything. The hallway was narrow, dark as pitch. He reached the door he'd seen from outside and knocked once, soft as a breath. A pause, then a voice, low and wary. "Who's there?" "Cade Morrow." "Mercy," he said. "Your daddy sent me." Silence stretched long, thick. Then a shuffle. Chains clinked faintly. The door cracked open, and Lila's face appeared, eyes wide, sharp. "Cade." He nodded. "You real?" He gave a small, dry smile. "Better be." She pulled the door wider, fury burning in her gaze, not fear. "I was about to get out myself," she said, chin high. "Don't doubt it," he replied. She wasn't weak, never had been. "You got anything you can't leave?" he asked, glancing around the bare room. "Just what's in my head," she said, fierce. "Good. Let's go." Footsteps pounded upstairs, loud and sudden. "Lila, where the hell are you at?" Rafe's voice roared, slurred with drink but dangerous. Cade spun, drawing his revolver and pushing her behind him. "I'll draw him off. Get to the window." "I'm not leaving you," she hissed, stubborn. "Ain't time to argue. Too late." Rafe rounded the corner, rifle in hand, eyes bloodshot and wild. "You son of a," he snarled. Cade fired first, the shot cracking like thunder, tearing into Rafe's shoulder. He screamed, dropping to one knee. "Go!" Cade barked, grabbing Lila's hand. They bolted down the hall, glass shattering behind them as another Cutler cousin opened fire from a window. Cade kicked the back door open, wood splintering. Lila ducked low, running like hell toward the brush, bullets ripping through the night air. One grazed Cade's arm, a hot sting, but he kept moving. They dove behind a fallen log in the trees, hearts pounding. "You hit," he gasped. "No," she said, breathless. "Good." She turned, staring at him through the dark. Why'd you come? Knew your husband. Your dad. Couldn't ignore it. She touched his shoulders, soft. Thank you. He winced, blood dripping. This ain't over. They'll come after us. I know, she said, voice hard. I'm done running. I'll fight. Kate nodded, grim. They faced the horizon together. Freedom or hell waiting ahead. Rain fell in thick, icy sheets, hammering the ground, turning it to mud. Kate and Lila rode hard, the horses' hooves slamming into the muck, each breath a white cloud in the cold. Trees whipped by, branches clawing at them like hands trying to drag them back. Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to shake their bones, but neither flinched. Cade's arm ached, the bullet grazed burning, blood soaking his sleeve warm and sticky against the chill. Lila clung to him from behind, soaked through, her teeth chattering but her eyes sharp, scanning the darkness for shadows, for movement. She wasn't the quiet, locked-up woman anymore. She was awake, alive, plotting. They veered off the road into a shallow ravine, the horse slipping in sludge but finding its feet. Lila leaned close, shouting over the storm. There's an old trap and shelter up the ridge. Eli built it years back. Salted meat, firewood, might still be there. Kate nodded, jaw tight. Worth a shot. They turned east, cutting across a narrow bluff where the path shrank to a ledge, slick and dangerous. The horse struggled, hooves sliding. Lila jumped down, running alongside, her hands guiding it as Cade's grip weakened, blood loss making him dizzy. Mud coated her legs, soaked in her boots, but she pressed on, steadying the mare with every step. They reached the shelter as the rain hit its peak, a low, moss-covered shack tucked under a rocky outcrop, half hidden in the mist. Kate slid off, pulling Lila inside. The walls groaned under the wind's push, but they held. Inside, it was dark, musty but dry. A pile of firewood sat in the corner, brittle but untouched. Lila struck a match with shaking hands, the flame flickering, then catching. A soft orange glow filled the space, shadows dancing on the walls. Kate sank to the floor, back against the wall, breath shallow and ragged. Lila knelt beside him, peeling back his soaked sleeve. You're bleeding bad, she said, voice tight. Had worse, he muttered, wincing as she touched the wound. It wasn't deep, but it was messy, torn wider by the ride. She found an old canteen and some torn cloth in the corner, working fast to clean it, her lips pressed thin to hold back tears. You shouldn't have come for me, she whispered, hands steady despite the words. Cade looked at her, sweat beading on his brow. Ain't the first dumb thing I've done. She smiled, just a flicker, then it faded. They're coming. Rafe won't stop. He'll chase us till we're dead. I don't plan on dying, Cade said, voice low, and I ain't letting them take you back. A twig snapped outside, sharp against the rain's roar. Lila's head jerked up, and she grabbed Eli's old rifle from the wall, still loaded, still oiled. Voices drifted in, faint but clear. She's in there. Spread out. Rafe wants her alive. Cade forced himself up, peering through a narrow slit in the wall. 3 men moved in the mist, guns drawn, one holding a lantern that swung wild in the wind. He waited, breath steady, until the lantern light passed the shelter, outlining the men in the glow. Then he fired. The closest dropped fast, a grunt cut short. The lantern clattered to the ground, throwing crazy shadows. Lila moved like a shadow herself, rising from the floor, firing twice, clean, precise. Another man fell, screaming, his gun tumbling into the mud. The third shouted, retreating into the trees, calling for more. Time to move, Kate said, voice tight. They burst out the back, racing through the trees, sliding down a muddy slope. Gunshots cracked behind them, bullets tearing through leaves. Lila stumbled once, catching herself on a root, but kept going. Kate stayed close, every step a fight against the pain in his arm. They reached a rocky outcrop and ducked behind it, chests heaving. Kate scanned the tree lean, figures spread out, lanterns and torches flickering, a net closing in. Lila pointed up. There's a narrow pass on that ridge. Horses can't follow. He nodded. Then we climb. The ridge was steep, slick with moss and runoff, the rain still pounding. Kate boosted Lila up first. hands slipping on her wet dress. She climbed fast, digging into the rock with her nails. He followed, every muscle screaming, blood dripping down his arm. Gunfire echoed below as the Cutlers found a shelter, found their dead. Lila reached the top and dropped to her knees, pulling Cade up the last few feet. They collapsed side by side, soaked, shaking alive. "They won't cross this," she gasped, wiping rain from her eyes. "Too narrow, too high. Gives us time." Cade looked at her, rain dripping from his hat. "You sure you ain't part goat?" She laughed, short and rough, easing the weight on them for a moment. Below, voices barked orders, but no one climbed. "Not yet." "We got one shot," Cade said. "Cabin I know, north between two ridges. Old friend's place. He's gone, but it's still there. We can hole up, heal." She nodded, fierce. "Let's go." They traveled all night, feet squelching in mud, wind biting deep. The sky lightened slow, gold bleeding into gray. They reached the cabin at dawn. Small, weather-beaten, half-covered in vines, but it had walls, a roof, a door that locked. Cade pushed it open, gun up, but found only dust and quiet. "We made it," he breathed. Lila stepped in, eyes sweeping the space. A rickety table, a rusted stove, a cot with a sagging frame. Not much, but it was theirs. She turned to him, really looking at him now, pale, bleeding again, half dead on his feet. Without a word, she moved to him, unbuttoning his shirt to clean the wound proper. "Didn't think I'd breathe free air again," she murmured, pressing cloth to his arm. "You did that. You got yourself out," he said, voice rough. "Not alone," she replied. Their eyes met, the silence shifting, not awkward, but heavy with everything they'd survived. Outside, the rain slowed, birds waking in the trees. A new day crept in. Lila stepped back, sitting across from him. "They'll come again," she said, certain. Lemke growled. "Next time we don't run." She smiled, small but sharp. "We make our stand." In the pale dawn light, with gunpowder still in the air and the storm fading, the widow and the outlaw braced for what was next, together. 3 days passed in that crooked shack, the calm before a storm you know is coming. Lila stood at the single window, rifle cradled in her arms, watching the narrow pass beyond the trees. Cade sat at the table, sharpening a knife, the scrape of stone on steel steady and slow. His arm was in a sling now, bandaged tight by Lila's careful hands. The floorboards creaked under every step, and the roof leaked in one corner, dripping into a tin cup she'd set there. They'd spent the time in near silence, broken only by quiet plans. Where to hide, where to shoot, how to live. Sometimes, Cade caught her staring into the fire, eyes shadowed with thoughts he didn't ask about. But she wasn't broken, far from it. Lila had shed the skin of the locked-up widow hour by hour. Her voice grew firm, her step sure. She cleaned their guns with a soldier's focus, mapped the land in her mind, every ridge, every stream. And when she spoke, it was with the steel of someone done begging for mercy and ready to take justice instead. Cade looked up from his blade. "They'll come soon." Lila nodded, not turning from the window. "I know. I want them to." He watched her, the way she stood, defiance in every line of her body, fire behind her eyes. Something stirred in him, pride, respect, maybe more, but he kept it quiet. Words could wait. Action was what mattered now. They'd seen the signs that morning. Smoke curling on the horizon, fresh hoof prints in the soft dirt by the stream. The Cutlers had tracked them, and this time, they'd brought more than torches. Cade figured at least 6 men, armed to the teeth, mounted, hungry for blood. Rafe would be there, patched up but alive, and he'd never stop. Not until Lila was dead, or his again. Cade knew which one that bastard wanted more. Lila turned, finally her face set. "They'll come through the choke point, the pass. It's our only edge. If we funnel him, we can hold him off." "We?" Cade raised an eyebrow, testing her. She smirked, faint but real. "You think I'm sitting this out?" He shook his head. "Not for a damn second." They moved fast, laying traps along the narrow path. Tripwires strung with old twine, spikes carved from broken branches and buried shallow, rags soaked in lamp oil ready to light. Lila's hands never shook as she worked, her mind racing ahead of his, seeing every angle. She'd turned fear into something sharp, pain into purpose. By afternoon, the trap was set, a deadly web waiting to snap. They took position in the trees above the pass, nestled behind rocks and thick brush. The wind died down, leaving an eerie stillness. Even the birds went quiet, like they knew what was coming. Cade lay beside her, rifle braced against a log, sighting down the trail. Lila adjusted her grip on Eli's repeater, her knuckles white but steady. "Think it'll work?" she asked, voice low. "It'll work," he said, certain. But he didn't say the rest. That it wouldn't be enough? Not really. Not unless Rafe went down for good. Until that man's blood soaked the earth, Lila would never be free. Hooves echoed through the canyon, slow at first, deliberate. Then came the creak of leather, the clink of spurs, the rough, cocky laughter of men who thought they couldn't lose. 6 riders appeared, one torchbearer up front, the flames spitting in the breeze. Rafe rode near the lead, shotgun across his lap, his mouth twisted into a scowl, shoulder bandaged, but still moving. Cade steadied his aim, finger light on the trigger. "You want him?" he whispered. Lila's eyes narrowed to slits. "He's mine." The first trap sprang when the lead horse hit the ridge, a rope pulled tight across the path. The animal screamed, crashing sideways, throwing its rider into the dirt. The man barely yelled before a spike tore through his leg, pinning him. Chaos exploded. Cade fired, dropping the second rider with a clean shot to the chest. Blood sprayed, and he went limp. Lila rose like a phantom, firing once, twice, 2 shots, 2 hits. A man fell screaming, clutching his side, his gun skittering away. Another ducked behind a rock, shouting for the others to spread out. Then Rafe's voice cut through, brutal and loud. "Push forward. They ain't but 2 of 'em." Another shot rang out, splitting the air like a whip. Lila ducked fast, dropping low behind a jagged stump, but not before her eyes locked with Rafe's across the narrow pass. For a heartbeat, time slowed. Recognition flashed in his glare, then twisted into something darker, pure, boiling hate. His face, lit by the torchlight flickering in the wind, was a mask of rage, his bandaged shoulder hunched, but his grip on the shotgun steady. He swung down from his horse with a grunt, boots hitting the dirt hard, and crouched behind a moss-covered boulder, his movements quick despite the pain. He fired blind into the trees, not aiming, just unleashing fury. Pellets tore through bark, splintering wood, raining shards around her. "Lila!" he roared, his voice raw and jagged, echoing off the canyon walls. "Think you can kill me? You ain't got the guts. You were nothing before Eli. Nothing but a preacher's brat. And you're less than nothing now." The words hit her like stones, but she didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence burned hotter than his taunts, a quiet fire he couldn't touch. She pressed her back against the stump, feeling the damp would dig into her spine, and tightened her grip on Eli's rifle, her breath steady despite the chaos. The remaining Cutler men pushed forward, clumsy and bold, stepping over the traps like they didn't see the danger, like fools drunk on their own bravado. Their boots crunched on the rocky ground, their shadows stretching long and twisted in the torch glow. Cade, still hidden in the tree lean above, caught one trying to sneak around the side, his rifle barking once. The man didn't even scream, just a choked gasp as the bullet punched through his gut. He wailed then, a high, pitiful sound, rolling down the slope, clutching at the dirt before going still, a dark stain spreading beneath him. Lila barely glanced his way. Her focus stayed on Rafe, on the monster who'd caged her, who'd turned her life into a slow death. Then she moved, sliding from the tree lean like a shadow, breaking free, racing down the ridge with her rifle in her hands. She was a target now, drawing Rafe's fire like she wanted it, like she was daring him to try. The air exploded with the crack of his shotgun, pellets whistling past her, clipping leaves and kicking up dirt. Cade cursed under his breath from above, his voice lost in the wind. But he covered her, his shots ringing out sharp and fast, picking off anyone dumb enough to follow her reckless charge. She moved like a storm, fast, fearless, her bare feet pounding the uneven ground, rocks cutting in her soles, but she didn't feel it. Living or dying didn't matter anymore, just ending this did. Her hair whipped wild in the wind, strands sticking to the sweat and blood on her face. Rafe rose from behind his boulder, slow and deliberate, a devil's grin splitting his scarred face. He leveled his shotgun at her, the barrel glinting black in the dim light, his finger twitching on the trigger. Lila dove just in time, throwing herself behind a slab of rock as the blast erupted. Pellets shredded the air where she'd been, smashing into the stone, sending chips flying like shrapnel. Dust stung her eyes, but she didn't blink. She came up on one knee, mud streaking her dress, and aimed, her hands steady, her breath held. The shot cracked loud, her bullet slamming into Rafe's leg just above the knee. Blood sprayed hot and dark, soaking his pants, and he howled, a deep animal sound collapsing hard to the ground. The shotgun slipped from his grip, clattering against the rock, but he didn't stay down. Stubborn as death itself, he clawed back up, dragging himself with one arm, his injured leg trailing useless behind him. His face twisted with pain and hate, spit dripping from his lips as he glared at her. Lila stood slow, her rifle still trained on him, stepping closer through the churned-up dirt. Each step was deliberate, her boots sinking into the mud, the wind tugging at her dress like it wanted to pull her back. Rafe spat blood onto the ground, his grin returning, crooked, ugly, defiant. "Go ahead, girl," he rasped, his voice thick with venom. "Shoot me. You'll always be a cutler. Don't matter how many of us you kill. You're ours, and you'll die ours." Her hands didn't shake, not even a tremor. She stared down at him, her eyes cold as the steel in her grip, and let his words hang there, heavy in the air. Then she spoke, each word falling like a blade, sharp and final. "You're wrong," she said. "I was never one of you. You locked me up, starved me, beat me till I bled. But I didn't die. I changed. I grew stronger than you'll ever know." Rafe's grin faltered for a split second, just a flicker, but she saw it. He shifted, slow and sly, his good hand inching toward the pistol tucked in his belt, thinking she wouldn't notice, thinking he still had a chance. She didn't notice. Her finger tightened on the trigger, and she fired once, a single, clean shot that echoed through the trees like a thunderclap, final and absolute. Rafe's body jerked hard, the bullet tearing through his chest. His hand froze mid-reach, the pistol slipping from his fingers into the mud. He slumped forward, then crumpled sideways, his eyes wide and empty, staring at nothing. Unblinking, lifeless, the hate drained out of him at last. Blood pooled beneath him, mixing with the dirt, turning it black in the torchlight. The last Cutler men froze where they stood, their shouts dying in their throats. Then they scattered, running like rats into the shadows, boots slipping on the wet ground, disappearing into the trees. Cade stepped out from a spot above, his gun still smoking, blood seeping fresh through his shirt where the graze had reopened. He moved slow, favoring his good arm, but when he looked at Lila, his face held something new. Relief, maybe peace, maybe something deeper he couldn't name. Lila stood over Rafe's body a long time, the wind tugging at her hair, lifting it like dark wings. Her chest rose and fell, her breath steady now, the rifle hanging loose in her hands. She didn't feel triumph, not yet, just the weight of it being over. She turned to Cade, her face unreadable, a mix of exhaustion and steel. "It's done," she said, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through the fading echoes of the fight. He nodded, his gray eyes meeting hers. "It is." They burned the bodies that night, flames roaring high and bright against the black sky, the smell of smoke and flesh thick in the air. Neither spoke much. Words weren't needed. Something had shifted, not just out there, but inside them. Cade watched Lila in the firelight, her face gold and shadowed. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like someone forged new. Morning came quiet and clean, the rain washing the earth, the sky stretching wide and blue above the ridges. They packed what little they had, guns, a knife, her diary, and left the cabin behind, heading north on foot. A week later, they reached a stretch of land Cade had once claimed. Wild and open, a river cutting through it, grass swaying like waves. No town, no people, just silence and sun. They built a house together, nothing grand, just four walls, a slanted roof, a porch facing west. Cade's wound healed slow, leaving a jagged scar. Lila planted herbs in a clay pot by the door, kept Eli's rifle close, and Cade's knife stayed sharp, just in case. But no one came. Time rolled on. A year later, on a spring morning thick with birdsong, Lila stepped outside in a faded dress, her hair braided loose down her back. Cade stood under a sycamore tree by the river, holding something wrapped in cloth. She walked to him, barefoot in the grass. He unfolded it. A simple silver ring, bent but shining. He didn't say anything, just held it out. She took it, tears welling but not falling. They married under that tree, the wind their witness, the river humming soft behind them. Lila tilted her face to the sky, breathing deep. For the first time in years, no fear lingered, no shadows, no footsteps echoing down a hall. Just freedom. Cade squeezed her hand. "Still think I shouldn't have come for you?" She smiled, real and warm. "I think I was waiting to break out myself. You just handed me the chance." They stood there, arms around each other, the sun climbing high, painting the world gold. Some stories end in blood or fire, but theirs ended in the quiet victory of living. For Lila, now, just Lila, that was enough.